Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome back to this epic, which is how to build an audio PC. Now, in the last episode, I left you hanging on the edge by your fingernails in the BIOS. You've set up your system, it's all ready to go, and all you need to do now is install Windows. And then we'll actually have a proper working computer. Now, I kind of assumed that you'd be able to install Windows all by yourself, because it's not really that difficult. But then I thought, for the purposes of completeness, I really should go through that process as well. And maybe there are some points to make that people are confused about or wonder about, and I can fill in those little gaps. Now, unfortunately, one of the reasons why it's taken me a long time to come up with this video is because I accidentally deleted the entire introduction section off my camera somehow. So here I am doing it again. Now, you'll hardly notice because I'm even wearing the same shirt as I was when I did the original one. So hopefully you won't be able to see the join, but I'm sure you will. In case you're wondering, this is not a video that's going to be full of Windows tweaks. I'm going to save all of that for another video on tweaking and tuning and performance testing your system once you've got everything ready to go. But also, I'd like to suggest that the days of hardcore tweaking are really sort of behind us, partly because Windows works really well these days, but also because the system that you're building, this audio PC, has come from all the right choices in hardware, and that's going to make your system stable, powerful and awesome as it is. I mean, if you were trying to make an audio PC out of some laptop that you picked up that used to be the one that you used at school, that you've then reworked and plugged in a USB interface to, and you're getting crackles and glitches and pops and it's all covered full of terrible things, then that's the sort of system that would need a lot of tweaking. But the audio PC, because it's built well from the right components in the first place, should be an easy ride when it comes to Windows. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to install it, just step you through the process, and then installing drivers and updates and getting the whole thing ready for you to install your DAW software and your audio interface. Anyway, Windows installation then. Let's get on with it. So the first question is, which version of Windows are we going to install? Now, that's a bit of a silly question really, because it's going to be Windows 10. Why Windows 10? Well, because it's the current version and you want to stay up to date. You want to give your system the best chance of working with everything that works. And that can only really be done with the most current version of the operating system. Now, of course, we all loved Windows 7. Windows 7, yeah, oh, great, the glory days of Windows 7. But actually, as Windows has progressed from version 7, I believe it's much better. I even liked Windows 8, not because of all the crazy touchy stuff, but because they had changed the file system. They had evolved how the file manager worked and other bits and pieces that just made the workflow make more sense. It was faster, it was quicker, you could navigate things better. To the point where I find now when I use a Windows 7 system, it feels clunky, it feels slow and old, and it just takes an age to do anything. So Windows 10 built on what Windows 8 did and is actually a very lean, mean and fabulous operating system. So we're going for Windows 10. So should we go for Home or for Pro? Well, this is one of those things that really doesn't matter anymore. It used to matter. Back in the Windows 7 days, running Home and Pro had an effect on the amount of RAM you could run, because there were artificial limitations on how much memory you could have in your system, and that dictated which version of the operating system you should run. With Windows 10, that is no longer the case. Well, you know, the limits are still there, but the limits are for an amount of RAM that you couldn't possibly have or possibly buy or possibly install. So it doesn't matter if you run Home or Pro. Of course, you know, I understand that you are a professional, and so therefore you want the one that says Pro, because you're an idiot as well as a professional. You don't need to have that. The only reason for having the Pro version of the operating system is for strange, secure, bit-locked things like domain logging and other bits of security. If you're on a very posh network, on a school or a campus or something like that, then the Pro version is probably what you need. But for the absolute vast majority of users, you're just going to have to forget your professional credentials and go for Home and save yourself a few quid. What about the whole updates thing with Pro then? People ask. Well, what they mean is that in the Pro version, you can turn off updates for a little while, just for a little while, and then they come back on again. Do we really need to do that? I mean, there's an important point here, actually, about Windows updates, and that's this. The operating system needs to update itself because it needs to get better. It needs to fix things, it needs to improve itself, and it needs to adapt to what it is that you're doing. Now, traditionally, there's been a culture of people like myself, audio PC builders, of turning off anything within Windows that has anything to do with updates and anything which has anything to do with error reporting. And it turns out, right, that there's a bit of a flaw in that thinking. And that's because as we turned everything off, as we turned off the error reporting, we turned off the updates, we turned off the two-way communication with Microsoft. Microsoft have absolutely no data whatsoever on any musicians using their operating system, because they rely on that kind of feedback from people's systems. When it crashes, it sends crash reports, it analyzes systems about drivers and other bits and pieces that you're doing. It has a ton of information on everything other than us musicians who have been turning that off. So if we want an operating system to be better for us, to be tailored better to what we're doing, to understand low latency, to understand the needs of creatives and music producers, we need to leave things like updates and error reporting on. We need to leave it on. Microsoft needs to start building up data about what we're doing so that it can better serve us as professional users. And we need to embrace the idea that Windows 10 and our relationship to it and our relationship to Microsoft is one that's actually important to have that connection. So the other question people ask, I don't know why anymore, is whether you should go 32-bit or 64-bit. 64-bit, obviously, for the simple reason that it gives you access to more than 4 gigabytes of RAM. If you're running 32-bit, 4 gigs is the absolute maximum you can handle. So it's a no-brainer, really. So 64-bit version of Windows 10 Home. That's what you want. Or Pro if you want. Pay the extra, get Pro. That's fine. I don't really care. That's completely fine. But what's important is that you buy a license. Don't give me this rubbish about, oh yeah, I'm just going to get a cracked copy of Windows. I've just spent £2,000 on a computer, but the Windows is going to be cracked. Oh, don't do that. That's just stupid. That doesn't make any sense at all. So purchase yourself a license, boys and girls. It's the right thing to do. So, pep talk over, let's get into the dirty business of installing Windows 10. How do we do it? Well, no one's got a CD drive these days, so I had CDs, I don't have them anymore. You know, having CD media is really no point to any of that. The best thing to do is to go to the Microsoft website and download the latest version of Windows. Now, make sure you do go to the Microsoft website to do this. Don't download Windows from some other place. The place you want to go to is Microsoft.com, download Windows 10, because that's how you do it these days. You download it to a thumb drive. You will need around about an 8 gigabyte thumb drive, and we're going to create the Windows installer onto this fella and then use this to install our software. It's so much quicker, cleaner and easier than ever doing it off CD. And you can also be sure that you have the latest available version. So I'm going to bring you in and step you through exactly what you do. So go to Microsoft.com, software download Windows 10. You can just Google Windows 10 creation tool on any other computer, obviously, and it'll come up with this page, and you want to go to download tool now. Once downloaded, run it. At this point, plug in your USB drive. Obviously agree to everything. Okay, what you want to do is create installation media, USB flash drive, blah, blah, blah. You do not want to upgrade the PC that you're working on. You want to be creating installation media on this fella here. That's the plan. So select that one. The language, architecture and edition should match more or less the computer what you're using. If you don't want to use that, uncheck it and then you can choose different versions, etc. You don't need to worry about whether you're using Home or Pro as far as the edition goes. Just Windows 10 on its own is fine because that'll be dictated by the product key that you enter. But you do not want to choose 32-bit, just go 64-bit. It then asks where do you want to put it. We want to put it on here. We could create an ISO file to burn to a CD, but that would be ridiculous. So let's stick it on here, USB flash drive. That's the only one I've got. Let's go for that. Now it will completely and utterly format that USB drive, so it has to be one that you're completely willing to let Microsoft nuke and install Windows 10 onto. So it will now download Windows 10, stuff it onto a USB drive ready for installation. And so we'll come back to this soon. Now that it's downloaded, it does a quick verify to make sure that's all right, and then it kind of unpacks it onto the drive for you. And there you are, you're ready to go. Right, we have Windows on here. This is the magic bit. We're going to stuff this into our computer, which is on the floor. I'm not going to pick it up again. You know what it looks like by now. And then we'll just check in the BIOS to make sure that this is going to be selected as the boot device, which, I mean, if you have no other bootable devices in your system, it will automatically be selected. But let's just have a look anyway, yeah? Because it may be that you're trying to install Windows over a drive which already has Windows on it. Those are all possibilities, and so I just want to cross all those T's and dot all those I's. Now, I'd hardly recommend not having any other hard drive attached, connected to your computer, other than the one you're going to be installing Windows upon. No other hard drives, because you may accidentally install it on the wrong drive, or it might split its system across one and across the other. Strange things happen when you have more than one hard drive in there. So, from my point of view, I'm using an M2 card that's installed onto the motherboard, so that's the only form of storage that I want connected to the system, other than the USB thumb drive that I've just plugged in that has Windows on it. So if we look at easy mode to start with, we can see I've got my NVMe card installed there. That's what I'm going to be installing Windows on. And I've also got my Kingston Data Traveler, which is what my USB thumb drive is called, in there as well. So if we check in the advanced mode and go to boot option number 1, boot priorities, I want that set to the USB drive, not something else, not anything else. It doesn't matter if nothing else is there. It's just that one is the one that we're interested in. And so it's good to confirm that that's chosen. So we're going to exit this. It will reboot. It should then start to install Windows. Let's do that. Hooray! That's good. So let me bring you in that bit closer so that you can see exactly what's going on. At this point, adding a mouse to the system is probably a good idea. So check the language, click next. Do you want to install or do you want to repair, which is another option you can do when you're using the Windows 10 installation media, but we want to install. So the first thing I want you to do is enter your product key. That should be on your thing. It should be on your thing if you've bought a thing, or if you've bought it online, it will be in the email that they sent to you with that key on. If you don't have a product key, you can click on I don't have a product key, and then it'll ask you what version of Windows you want to install, because from the product key it usually knows what that is. So select the version for which you have a product key. As I said, Windows 10 Home is absolutely everything that you want. It just happens that my copy of Windows 10 here is for Pro, so I will go with that. Accept the license. Now with this type of installation, if you're doing a clean installation over the top of Windows, you absolutely always want to do custom. You don't really ever want to do this unless you are trying to repair your system by installing Windows over the top. So generally speaking, always go for custom, and that allows us to install on an absolutely fresh drive with nothing else, no possibility of a hint of anything in the past impacting upon what we're doing now. So this is asking us where we want to install Windows. We could, at this point, format the hard drive, we could create partitions, and we can decide exactly where we want Windows to go. If you were installing a single drive system, so you're not going to be using any other hard drives for recording stuff to, I would recommend splitting your system hard drive in two. The reason being is that you want your system drive to be relatively small, because you want to have everything installed in Windows and all your software installed on that system drive, but only that. All sample library, all large instruments or your audio recording files want to be on another drive or a second partition. The reason for that is so that you can back up your system and it's not an enormous thing. So once your system is ready, you've got it how you want to back it up. And if you've installed absolutely everything onto a single partition on a single drive, you're going to have to back it up to some external thing, and it's going to be huge and it's going to be crunching away for hours containing all of your sample library. It's much better, in my view, to have a small system drive with all your software installed that you can back up to another drive or to an external drive that doesn't take too long, so that if you do have a system and it breaks, you can get your system back relatively quickly. It doesn't really have any impact either way in performance terms. That's really not a factor. It's much more to do with organization, it's to do with backup and security and the speed with which those things happen. This is purely going to be my system drive. I've never had one of this size before. This seems huge, but on my last system I had a 250 gig system drive, and that is squeaking and pushing at the sides, trying to escape from itself. So I thought, I'm going to give myself 500 gigs worth of breathing space, which to me for a system drive seems enormous. But that's fine. That's what I'm going with. And then I'm going to have other drives installed that have all my sample library on, all of my audio recording files and projects and such like, and I will back those up and look after those separately. In this instance, the drive is there, doesn't need to be formatted. It's ready to go. I'm just going to click next. Windows is going to go and do a load of stuff. We'll come back at the next point. Now Windows wants to ask us a bunch of really interesting questions. Is the region right? Yes, of course it is. Do we have the right keyboard layout? Ooh, more than likely. Who would ever want a second keyboard? Oh heck, we've now got to connect it to the internet. Ethernet, really important in order for Windows to pull all of its stuff that it needs, extra updates and bits and pieces off the internet. Unless you know different, set it up for personal use. Now this is where you sign in with your Microsoft account. Your Microsoft account ties you into all sorts of things like OneDrive and other bits and pieces. It can be enormously useful if you're trying to transfer contacts and bookmarks and all that sort of rigmarole. And it enables you to have a fully embedded operating system with Microsoft. If you're scared of all of that, don't want any of that, then you can always create an offline account and use your system without connecting to the internet. But as I've said, actually getting on board with Windows 10 and Microsoft is a positive thing. So I would recommend signing in with a Microsoft account, and if you don't have one, you can create one here. Creating a PIN is an additional bit of security. Activity history is actually all about just sharing data between the different devices that you use. So if you've got a laptop that you're logged in with the same Microsoft account, it will then spread and move information across the two. This is not really about error reporting, that's something else. You can connect your phone to Windows if you like. I'm not going to worry about that. OneDrive is a very useful utility that comes as part of your Microsoft account and allows you a space in the cloud to save stuff. Again, it can be very useful, but that's entirely up to you. Cortana is helpful if you like that sort of thing. Again, that's up to you. Not using speech recognition. Not necessarily using location information, but again, it all depends on what you're doing. This isn't going anywhere, so I don't need to have Find My Device switched on. Send diagnostic data to Microsoft. This is the thing I talked about earlier, where this is becoming increasingly important for power users like ourselves. So yeah, I would select full. For tailored experiences, it's purely pumping adverts at you that would be relevant as opposed to irrelevant. Same with the advertising ID. And then, as if by magic, we're in Windows. Hooray! Now this isn't something that I've seen before. The ASUS Q Installer. It says it automatically installs drivers. Now that could be very, very useful. I mean, one of the natural things you do after installing Windows is to put in the CD that came with your motherboard to install all of the custom and proper drivers for your motherboard. However, I don't have a CD drive, so I'm going to be having to go online to download them directly from the ASUS website. This probably gives me an easier way to do that. And this is also important because although Windows 10 actually includes the vast majority of drivers that you need, there may be some more updated ones or some more specialist ones, particularly for this motherboard, that ASUS hold only. So I think this is a good idea. Now this is exactly the sort of interface that you would have seen had you put the CD in after Windows had installed. So this is very encouraging, I have to say. When you go through this, you want to remove things which are not going to be of any use to you whatsoever. Special offers, no, don't want that. You may want to install Google Chrome, but do that yourself. Don't do it from this point, because you're not entirely sure what it's going to contain exactly. The utilities, no, I don't think you want any of those. Certainly not Norton security. Under no circumstances do you want to install Norton antivirus on your system. It is extremely detrimental to the performance of audio software and gets in the way of everything. If you are creating a computer for your children or for a friend or someone who's just an idiot, then Norton is perfect for keeping away bad things. But for an audio system, do not install it. Windows Defender is plenty as far as antivirus is concerned. The rest of these, yeah, we do want the latest updated version of the driver, please. And that's what this is offering us. If you're installing a system on a different sort of motherboard, you may not get this option. But the idea is that once you are in Windows, you either put in the CD that came with the motherboard, or you download the latest drivers from your motherboard's website. In fact, it's better to do that because that way you can be assured of having the latest version, whereas the versions that are on a CD may be older. You may find that your motherboard has a utility which will download drivers for you, but again, always check what it is that they're downloading. You do not want helping bits of software from ASUS or Gigabyte. You don't want any utilities. You don't want any internet security or free trials of anything at all. You want a clean system. And so only drivers. Drivers are the only things that you want to get from your motherboard's website. So Windows is installed. Great. Here we go. It has pulled something ridiculous out of my OneDrive account, which is fine. I don't care about any of that on here. Once you are into Windows, there are a couple of things that you need to do just to check that everything is as it should be. So go to the bottom right hand corner, right click on the Windows button and select Device Manager. This is your system. This is everything that's installed in your system, and you want to make sure there are no exclamation marks or question marks sticking out of here. If something was wrong, it would be sticking out and it'd have an exclamation mark or a question mark on it. And if that was the case, you'd then have to install a driver for it or find out why something that you've got attached to your system is not functioning correctly. Normally speaking, once you've run the motherboard drivers, once you've downloaded the drivers from the motherboard website and installed them, or installed them via utility as we did, this should be fine. The second thing you want to do is go down to this section here, go to All Settings, go to Update and Security, and you want to make sure that absolutely every update has been installed. Now it may well say, oh, no updates are available, but when you press check for updates, you'll probably suddenly find that there's a whole load available. Oh, look at that. Would you believe it? And this includes a cumulative update for Windows 10 version 1909, which is quite a chunky one. So go into Windows Update, check for updates, let it download and install everything, and then restart. Then go back, check again, restart, go back, check again, and make absolutely sure that there's no updates waiting to happen. You're up to date, it says. Great, let's check again. No, you see, you're not up to date. It does this every time. Okay, one more try. There, it's good. So now that we're here, what tweaks should we apply? Well, I'll probably do a deeper video on Windows 10 tweaking. I've already done other videos on it. Mostly tweaking is about troubleshooting. It's about you're having problems on your system and you want to get it running better. I mean, that's going to be true for people who buy laptops or buy a ready-made computer, because it's usually full of crap. But remember, we have built this computer from scratch, and so there shouldn't really be anything in here which is going to cause it trouble. But here are the things that I recommend you do anyway. First of all, check to see if there's any software which is running down by the clock. There's usually some antivirus, maybe something to do with OneDrive or some other background backup system. But basically, you don't want anything running here if you can help it. If there is anything, or just to check, right click on the taskbar, select Task Manager, click on More Details, go to the Startup tab, and if there's anything here that you don't want to be running, then put it to disabled. So the Realtek HD audio thing, that's to do with the onboard sound. I'm not interested in that. I'm going to disable it. All this is doing is disabling something that happens at startup. If you want to use any of this stuff, you can do so by simply turning it on or running the software. I don't want notifications from Windows Security either. So those things I would disable. Next, go to Power Settings. So these can be personal choices, but I would never let my screen turn off, because I'm often away from it doing something which is involving the screen, like running a DAW or playing MIDI instruments, and I don't want the screen to turn off while I'm in the middle of recording something. I certainly don't want my computer to go to sleep. Computers going to sleep is a very bad thing in terms of audio production, because your computer may feel that it's not doing anything, because, as I say, you might be working on a piano piece or another instrument and you're practicing and you need your computer to be running alongside. However, you may not be touching it during that time, and the computer might suddenly shut itself down into sleep. Now, when a computer goes to sleep, it tries to turn all sorts of different things off so that it can come back on again with all those things working. However, with audio interfaces, with MIDI controllers, with plugins and other bits of software, none of these things like that very much. So don't let your computer go to sleep, not while you're running audio software. Then click on Additional Power Settings, Show Additional Plans, select High Performance, and that's really it. That's probably it. There are other tweaks, but if you've set this to high performance, that's going to give your system the best chance of just generally working. The other thing I would do in the regular control panel is go to User Accounts, change the control settings, and turn off the annoying thing that comes up every time you try to do something and it asks you to reconfirm. If I set that down to Never Notify, it's not going to do that. You'll find that in the User Account control settings. See, that's what happens if you don't have that down to Don't Notify. So there you have it. That is more or less it. That is Windows installed. Now, I'm sorry if it seemed a bit convoluted or overly talky, or I seem to have given a huge amount of information unnecessarily about a simple thing which is installed in Windows. However, I felt it was important just to put forward as much as I possibly could, because if you've not installed Windows 10 before, it can be strange and weird, and lots of boxes come up that you're not entirely sure what it is you're supposed to say. On the whole, though, you can stumble your way through it without too much trouble, really, and I haven't given you any particular secrets. I'm just trying to re-emphasize the steady way through, keeping things sane and normal, not installing crap that ends up down here running by the clock or running in the background or stealing resources, not installing masses of antivirus software, those sorts of things. As far as tweaking goes, as I said, if you just change the power settings to high performance, turn off sleep maybe, turn off those annoying notifications about users, that's it. That's pretty good. That's going to get you moving forward. And now what you want to do is start to organize your system. I mean, of course, it doesn't have to look like this. This is just my synchronized view. You can stick on all sorts of different colors, different themes, you know, whatever you want. Whatever you want. That's up to you. These sorts of things, the backgrounds, the screensavers, those sorts of things have such a minimal impact on your system that it doesn't matter where you have them or not. I have an enormous processor in here, and it's going to cope with all these different things without a murmur, I would say. So set it up however you want. I don't like having this search thing down here, this thing. Don't like having this Katana bar. I much rather have an icon for it, or even have it not there at all. And that gives me more room on my taskbar, because that's where I like to put all of the shortcuts to all the software that I use. That's just how I use it. So what I'd recommend you do next is install any additional hard drives. Make sure that they are installed and there and fine. In fact, we could do that now, just as one last thing. Should we do that? Let's do that. So I'll turn the system off. Right, so I've now shut down my system. I've plugged in both a mechanical drive and an SSD drive. And what you need to do now is initialize those for Windows. So to get to that, right click on the Start button. Go to Disk Management. You might not be able to see that properly on screen, but essentially your hard drive should be listed there. So our hard drive and our SSD drive are both listed here. The top one is normally going to be your system drive. It's worth calling it that. So right click the system partition, go to Properties, and just call it System. Just so you can be sure that that is that. Now my SSD drive down here previously had an operating system on it, and it's not been completely and utterly nuked and removed. But I'm only losing a few megabytes to these bits, and there's nothing I can do within Windows on its own in order to return this to a single one drive thingy. I would need an additional utility, so I'm not that fussed about it at the moment. So the bit of it that I can use, I'm going to right click, I'm going to say new simple volume, next, the full space that it wants to use, I'm going to assign it a letter, I'm going to format it in NTFS. I tend to always put the unit allocation size to 32K, and I'm going to type Scratch because that's what this drive is going to be. This other one is a large mechanical drive, again new simple volume, full size, it's going to be called E. File system is going to be 32K again. I'm going to call it audio. So both of those drives are now set up. So if I go to the Windows Explorer, click on My PC, I have all three drives listed, present and correct, ready for files. Now if I was doing this properly, I'd then say to you, this would be a really good time to back up your system, because you've got your system, it's installed, it's ready to go, and now you're going to install a whole load of other stuff. You're probably going to break it, aren't you? Or mess it up somehow. So this is an opportunity to back up your system. How do you do that? I don't really remember. Probably the best way to do it is to get some third-party software like Paragon, Home Backup. There's a free version of that you can get, which is enough just to do a backup of that system drive of yours to one of the other drives, so that if you do stuff everything up when you're installing other software and plugins and audio interfaces and MIDI controllers, that you can go back to a known state and create new backups. Once you've had a successful something or other, create a new backup and keep going, keep doing that, getting into the habit of it, so that when your system breaks, explodes, catches fire or whatever, you will have a way back to a working system really very quickly. So there you go, that's enough, I think. That's enough. You can go on forever in these things, and I really don't want to, because you must be bored of my voice now, as am I at this point. So that is Windows installed on the Audio PC, and I really hope that's been helpful. And I'm sorry if it's not clearer and conciser, because these things sometimes just need a bit of discussion. So now you have your computer, go make some tunes.